Alright guys, so what I want to do now is pick up where we left off with the last lecture. So we've just fought the Battle of Midway. The United States now has the initiative in the war in the Pacific. We still don't have parity. The Japanese Navy still has a higher concentration of forces, but now we have the initiative. The Japanese cannot mount any further offensive operations. So the first thing the United States needs to do is maintain the supply link to Australia, because Australia is the key in the South, the South and the Southwest Pacific. Because if Australia can be held, and there were some fears that the Japanese were going to invade it, if Australia can be held, okay, then that gives an access to the southern resource area. From Australia, you can then New Guinea to the Philippines to Indonesia, and that cuts off the Japanese trade. So what the Japanese hope to do is on a small island that nobody had ever heard of really before, the island of Guadalcanal. They hope to build an airfield, or what they can do with this airfield of Guadalcanal. And let's actually, wrong button. I don't have a good map anywhere close, so let's click back through the lecture. I really should put more maps. That's the one good thing I love about teaching, in the classroom. I can just Alt-Tab and bring up a map or whatever. I could here, but then it throws off, the video. But if you look, okay, here in the Solomons is Guadalcanal. What the Japanese can do with long-range bombers, they can interdict any traffic coming from Hawaii to Australia. If there is no longer an influx of American troops and equipment and supplies, Australia might eventually, capitulate. And if they do, it just further strengthens the Japanese position. So what we see is in August 1942, the United States begins what it, jokingly referred to as Operation Shoestring, because this was going to be done on a shoestring budget. Right now, we're gearing up for Operation Torch, the invasion of North Africa. Okay? We're, coming off the Dieppe raid, where Rangers and Canadian troops go ashore in France and get the hell beaten out of them. So all of the good equipment is flowing to Europe. Marines land with World War I era 1903 Springfields. Instead of Shermans, M4 Shermans, or M3 Lees, they make do with M3 Stuarts. These aren't even the A1 model. And you can tell because they have side-mounted 30 caliber machine guns. These were deleted in the M3A1 model. It's called Operation Shoestring because it is done on the cheap. And what we see, the fighting for Guadalcanal, we get two different, aspects. We get the land battle and we get the sea battles. The land battle, goes really well. Initially, it's unopposed. Our guys land August the 7th, 1942. And it's actually funny, just one of those quirks of fate. My wife and I's birthday bookends Guadalcanal. She was born on August 7. My birthday is February 8, when, the last Japanese resistance ended, so that February 9, the campaign was declared over. Kind of just an interesting fact. But what we're going to see is the idea is to invade both, I don't have a map unfortunately, the islands of Guadalcanal, which would be here, and Tulagi, a small island up here. Tulagi was defended. The invasion beaches for Guadalcanal were not. The Japanese were not, it wasn't expected. Now this is a lengthy campaign because the Japanese send in reinforcements, we send in reinforcements. There's going to be lengthy naval battles, and in many cases, the United States, we're always just that hair breadth away from losing because we don't have enough stuff to effectively conduct this operation. Now, what we're going to see is Guadalcanal and Midway are the turning points of the Pacific War. Once this is done, the tone for the war in the Pacific will be dictated. But until February 9, 1943, the issue will always hang in doubt. Now, we're also going to see that, Guadalcanal can be put in the context of other American offensive operations. It is the first big American offensive of the war. But at the same time, the United States wants to, flex its muscles. What can we get away with? Things like that. We're going to see that on August the 17th, 10 days later, we see a diversionary raid at the island of Macon, where the 1st Marine Raider Battalion, embarked on the cruiser submarines Nautilus and Argonaut, will go ashore, and destroy, various installations. And the idea is to hope the Japanese would look at these other islands, would say, okay, everything we have is, unprotected, pull reinforcements from Guadalcanal, or at the very least, ensure reinforcements go to these islands, not Guadalcanal. The raid is incredibly successful. The Marine Raiders do a great job securing the island, destroying installations, and, they do their job, they get aboard the submarines again, and they retire. But there's a disastrous, unintended side effect of all this. What that is the Japanese learn, unfortunately, for the United States, that many of its outer positions were not that well fortified. Okay, again, 2 submarines landing, about a couple hundred guys were able to, sorry, wrong button, take over these islands, or at least, cause them a hell of a lot of problems. The Japanese realized their whole intent had been create this, I guess this way for you guys, fortified zone. And then the United States would have to smash into that zone. But it did not adequately fortify islands. So what we're going to see, 1942, the Macon Island raid, it's kind of a walk in the park. 1944, when American troops land on Macon Island, it is an absolute bloodbath, because now the Japanese are ready. And we're going to see that this inadvertently leads to the fortification of all of those islands that will lead to thousands and thousands and thousands of American troops being killed, which will in turn lead guys like Harry Truman to decide to drop the atomic bomb on Japan. This is where it begins. This is where, inadvertently we set the tone for how the Pacific War is going to go. Now that's getting a little ahead of story. Let's go back to Guadalcanal. At Guadalcanal, we're going to see that the Japanese put up a desperate naval action to try to save the island. By the first day, we capture the airfield. It is renamed Henderson Field after a Marine pilot who was killed at the Battle of Midway. And we see the Japanese commit most of their naval assets to try to stop these landings. And what we're going to see is, almost a year into the war, the United States Navy is still completely unprepared. Midway was more a stroke of luck than actual planning, than actual doctrinal training. The Japanese do not have technology. Now, what I mean by that is they don't have radar. Early on, neither do we. To compensate, the Japanese are absolutely brilliant at night fighting. They train for this. They prepare for this. They know how to do this. They also have a devastating weapon, the Type 96 Long Lance torpedo. That carries a stupidly big warhead. It is stupidly accurate. Unlike American torpedoes, it actually explodes, but it also has a range of several miles. What we're going to see is on the night of August 8th to 9th, the day after the landings, the United States and the Royal Australian Navy have naval superiority, 8 cruisers, 15 destroyers, to 7 cruisers and 1 destroyer. But the Japanese are better skilled, and in 2 separate night actions, 4 Allied cruisers are sunk without loss. 3 damaged ships, but they're minor. The Astoria, the Quincy, Vincennes for the United States Navy are sunk. The cruiser Canberra of the Royal Australian Navy is torpedoed and holed so bad that she eventually has to be scuttled the next day. And what all this means, and I actually misspoke, it's Type 93, not Type 96, my error, is this battle shows the United States is unprepared. What do? The Navy withdraws from Guadalcanal briefly, which means troops are ashore at Guadalcanal, but their supplies are not. Now you have detachments of Marine on enemy-occupied territory without their lifeline to the sea. If the Japanese could launch a major sustained offensive, this is a bad day for everybody. But we have to withdraw in part because the Japanese Navy is better equipped. Things like this, the Type 93 Long Lance torpedo. Again, it is a stupidly effective weapon, and what the Japanese would do is actually take some of their older light cruisers and rebuild them into torpedo cruisers. Just give these things rows of torpedo tubes. And what they would do if they knew that an American force was out there, sail in such a way and just fire barrages, volleys, if you will, of these torpedoes. If each cruiser could lob 24 torpedoes, get 4 or 5 cruisers together, have 100 torpedoes streaking a few degrees apart towards the American lines, and something will hit something. It is almost a statistic probability. And these torpedoes are damnsome powerful. So the Japanese have better night fighting tactics. They have better discipline. One of the things we're going to see in various Savo Island, Second Savo Island, all of these various battles, is that American ships tend to scatter. If the flagship is knocked out, the other ships kind of don't really know what the heck to do. The Japanese are veterans. They've trained for this. They've drilled for this. And if you look at Guadalcanal, the majority of the battles are going to be fought at night. And the reason for this is our ships don't want to be there during the day because aircraft from Rabaul on New Britain could come in and bomb our ships. The Japanese don't want to be there during the day because bombers from Henderson Field could attack them. So what we're going to see is this continued cycle of night battles, so much so that the area around Guadalcanal, if this is Guadalcanal, okay, my fixed, and here is Tulagi, the area in between earns the name Iron Bottom Sound because so many ships are sunk that, okay, it's an exaggeration, but the thought is you could walk across the bottom of the ocean and never touch dirt. It would only be sunken ships. The Japanese have a distinct advantage until the mass adoption of radar. And even then, battles are still going to be dicey. So what we're going to see is the Allied forces have to draw away. Convoy runs have to be small, they have to be quick, but for a large part, the Marines on Guadalcanal have to make do with what they have, and that is a problem. And so if we look at the land combat on Guadalcanal, you're saying, well, okay, if the Japanese have control of the sea and we don't, why are we even talking about this battle? Why is it not just a Japanese victory? Because here where we're going to find the problems with Japanese warfare. Remember, they are an island nation, cut off from modern resources. Okay? They cannot fight industrial warfare. Yeah, we're short on supplies, but we have the M3 Stuart. Yes, by the War in Europe standards. Okay, if this is August 1942, by now the Germans are fielding the Panzerkampfwagen 3J Special, which has a high-velocity 50mm gun. They're also fielding the Panzer IV F2, what the British would call the Panzer IV Special, with a high-velocity 75mm gun. These are reactions to the T-34. When we talk about Russia here in a while, we'll get to that. Okay. The British by now are fielding the Crusader Mark III, which has a high-velocity 6-pounder gun, or it's a 57mm gun. We have the Sherman and the Lee, which have 75mm guns. The Stuart only has a 37mm. It's high velocity, but it's small. Its armor is so thin, the M3 Stuart, will literally, after 1943, disappear from the Mediterranean theater and the European theater. But it will continue to be used all the way up to the end of the war in the Pacific because the Japanese build only horrible tanks. Okay, the main Japanese tanks that would have at this time would be the Type 97 Chi-Ha and the Type 95 Ha-Go. They have really thin armor. The Chi-Ha, a low-velocity 57mm gun. The Ha-Go, a low-velocity 47mm gun. Later we'll get the Chi-Ha Kai, or the improved Chi-Ha, also known as the Shinhoto Chi-Ha, which has a high-velocity 47mm gun, but still paper-thin armor. There's also the issue of numbers. We simply have more tanks. We have more machine guns. The Japanese do not. We have more artillery than the Japanese. Our artillery is new. There's dates from the First World War. Our machine guns are proven weapons. At this stage in the war, we have the Model 1918 Browning automatic rifle, which is, it's not quite an assault rifle in the sense it doesn't use an intermediate cartridge, but it's a rifle that, you can shoot as a rifle. It's damn accurate, but with a 20-round magazine, it can go full auto. Okay? The Japanese have nothing like that. Marines actually adopted the Thompson submachine gun in 1921 before any other branch of the United States Army. We have lots of submachine guns. Submachine guns were rare in the Japanese Army. The Type 100 was not issued all that much. Our light machine guns at this stage of the war would have been, actually, we wouldn't really have light machine guns at this point. The Marines really would not have used that many Model 1919 air-cooled machine guns. They would have had some. The main machine gun would have been the Model 1917 Browning 30 caliber, which is a water-cooled machine gun. With water-cooled, what that does, if here's the barrel, you would have a jacket around it filled with water. And as the water heated up, it was hooked to a hose, which went to a condenser. So the steam escapes into the condenser, condenses back into water, then gets recycled back into the gun. That meant you could just pop, 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 just keep over, on and on and on and on. Japanese had more light machine guns, but Japanese infantry weapons were kind of weird, okay? Understand, the Japanese rely on the code of Bushido. They rely on fighting spirit. For them, it's the bonsai charge. This idea, you just run in massed bayonet charges, almost like it's World War I. Because their light machine guns are kind of odd. The Type 96 and Type 99 are fairly decent weapons, but they have bayonet mounts. Literally, the Japanese expected you to put a bayonet on a 30-pound light machine gun and stab somebody with it. Their Type 11 light machine gun they would sometimes use at this point was really, really cheesy. You had to lubricate the cartridges, which means dirt and dust and stuff could get in and it could jam. It also had a little hopper to the side where what would happen is infantry were supposed to come over, give you a clip of their cartridges, you pop it in, and what it would do is it would punch through the stripper clip to fire the cartridge. Okay, it's cumbersome, they're over-engineered, they don't have a lot of them. Understand, the Japanese are reliant on fighting spirit, bayonet charges, whereas the Marines and the Army are based on technology, modern warfare. Tanks, infantry, machine guns, artillery planes, all working together. The Japanese Army was designed to fight in China, designed to fight a power that quite realistically had barely joined the 20th century, that did not possess modern combat experience. And it shows on Guadalcanal. The Japanese simply were not prepared enough. And so we're going to see things like this, Edison's Ridge, where, whereas, the Marines would, move closely, or we'd have artillery bombardments or tanks, the Japanese would simply do mass charges where in prepared positions, with your 03 Springfields, with your rifle grenades, with your Model 1917 Browning machine guns, with your Model 1918 BARs, you could just tear into these guys before they ever got to your position. There's also the issue, the standard Japanese rifle at this point would have been the Type 38 Arisaka, which fired a 6.5 millimeter cartridge. Okay. Now, for those of you that are not weaponly inclined, the United States, we're using World War I stuff, of which the Arisaka dates from 1905, but we're using a 30 caliber cartridge. Now, to convert that into metric, if theirs is 6.5 millimeter, ours is 7.62 millimeter. What that means is their stuff might have a higher velocity, but our stuff has a longer range, better destructive power, is more likely to penetrate cover, and when that bullet hits you, it is going to do a lot more damage. If you get hit, I actually own a Type 99 Arisaka when the Japanese upscaled to 7.7 millimeter. And these weapons are fairly crude by Western standards. They are long, they're cumbersome, they're clearly designed in that old school, that this with a bayonet, you can stab somebody off of a horse. Whereas our weapons, first the 1903 Springfield, which is, one of the world's first short rifles, and then, the M1 Garand, which is semi-automatic. The Japanese just cannot, pull this off. They cannot win in a war of technology. If we look in brief for the fighting on Guadalcanal, it all centers on Henderson Field. The idea is whoever controls that controls the island, whoever controls that dominates the region with air superiority. Now, what we're going to see is, yeah, the Japanese bring in more troops, but because of these bonsai charges, they will suffer casualties out of all proportion to the United States. There's also the issue that Guadalcanal, like many islands of the Pacific, is covered in dense jungles. That's going to obstruct large sweeping movements and major campaigns. So what that means is, while we might be limited in our use of tanks, if we're fighting a largely defensive campaign, okay, we can create kill zones. We can mine them. We can put tripwires. We can pre-sight it with artillery. And so the Japanese, because they can't, filter in, they have to use these frontal assaults. If you look at stuff like the Battle for Henderson Field, where Edison's Ridge is apart, October 24 to 26, entire Japanese regiments will be wiped out for relatively few American casualties. Yeah, we will suffer heavy losses, but the Japanese will always suffer out of all proportion. And so the fighting goes on and on and on, and so the Japanese Navy has to come in to try to step it up. The idea is to try to bombard Henderson Field, which they will do over and over and over, bringing battleships in to lob their 1 and 2 ton shells in. And again, a 1 ton shell filled with high explosive, that's a bad day when that blows up right over your foxhole. But then we see that the Japanese do this, but we're going to see that, again, if War of Technology is helping, sorry that I did not fix this, by the way. If we see that War of Technology is determining the course on land, we will see it determine the course at sea. Between November 12 and November 15, we're going to have a series of naval battles. And, in the initial battles, okay, on the 12th, you're going to have things like this at Tassafaronga, the cruiser New Orleans. This is what she looked like. This is what a Type 93 Long Lance torpedo does. It literally came in, smacked into the bow, and detonated the forward magazine in such a way it literally just blew the bow off, including the entire front turret. It's a miracle the ship did not sink. But, look right here, radar. Japanese draw first blood. Then on November 13 to 14, and then 14 to 15, we get what are called the First and Second Naval Battles of Guadalcanal, also known as Second and Third Savo Island. Now, what we're going to see is how the battle initially goes. In the first one, the battleship Hayai, the Japanese battleship Hayai, is beaten to hell by American cruisers. Okay, at close range, even an 8-inch shell will screw up a battleship, and we have radar, so our guys direct that fire and just set this battleship aflame. She then has to limp away, where she's later sunk by air power. The next night, her sister, the Kirishima, comes in to blast Henderson Field, and the new American battleships Washington and South Dakota are waiting. As the battle opens, South Dakota's power plant literally shorts out, deprives the ship of power, and it can't do anything. Well, the Japanese, remember, are trained for night fighting, but you still have to see. But the Washington has radar. Beep, beep. It knows exactly where the Kirishima is, exactly the range, exactly where to aim. And what basically happens is they close to a stupidly close range, and then with the Japanese not even knowing the Washington is there, the Washington just opens up a terrific, just hail of fire. Within 5 minutes, the Kirishima is hit by 9 16-inch shells and 40 or more 5-inch shells, and is just left ablaze and rolls over and sinks. It is a completely lopsided battle. The first ones end with, tactical American victories but heavy casualties. These last one, what these now mean is Hayai and Kirishima have been sunk. The Japanese Navy has again been bloody. The Japanese cannot cover what is now being known as the Tokyo Express. They can't land supplies. By this point, what the Japanese are having to do, they can't bring in troops. So what they do is they take oil drums, put supplies in them, but leave enough so that there's air so they float, have destroyers just get close to Guadalcanal, push them over the side, and hope that they float up on shore. That's all they can do. The Japanese are now on the defensive. And with that, it's just a simple matter of attrition. The U.S. is getting supplies, the Japanese are not. And yeah, and we see this on New Guinea as well. The Japanese are good jungle fighters. But they were really, really impatient. They wanted to try to end the war quickly, or to end the battle quickly. So again, these massed frontal banzai charges. And at times they're successful. But if you have a machine gun company with 4 light water-cooled light machine guns and plenty of ammo, you can hold up an entire Japanese regiment of 1,000 guys. So what we're going to see is Guadalcanal. If we just talked about October and then November, it takes till February 9, 1943, for the island to be secured. The fighting on New Guinea will continue. In fact, New Guinea will never be secured in the entirety of the Pacific War. But in the mindset, we're starting to put the idea, wait a minute, we can't take every island. We just spent 6 months on one island. We can't do that. So I'm going to leave off with what the U.S. plan is, and that is what we call island hopping. Don't take everything. Most assuredly don't invade the strong points. Simply take what you have to get by. And so if we look at the strategy in broad, this is where we'll pick up when we come back to the Pacific. I'm not sure. I can't remember what I've got. We're either going to go to North Africa or Europe, or Russia, which I guess is in Europe. But if you look, okay, we've taken Guadalcanal. We're fighting up New Guinea. We're going to bypass Rabaul here in New Britain. We're going to bypass lots of New Guinea. Here, we'll hit Tarawa, then Kwajalein, Eniwetok, the Marianas. I mean, we're bypassing lots of islands because the idea, take what we need to get over to the Philippines, to get over to Japan, so as to end the war. Bypass and starve out. As to quote Douglas MacArthur, starvation will be my weapon, hunger will be my ally. It's a gruesome business. But when we come back and we talk about, Tarawa, okay, understand, the Japanese, part of why they would do Banzai is not just their whole military tactic, but again, that code of Bushido. And we're going to see this repeated over and over and over. If surrender is not an option, okay, if you know you're going to lose, you can either commit a form of seppuku or suicide, or you can go out in a massed wave attack and try to take as many of them with you as you can. The Banzai serves 2 purposes. Are Japanese military commanders stupid? I don't think so. Not at all. But I think they're just not schooled in modern tactics of land warfare. I mean, put yourself in Russia. We see, massed Soviet charges when there's a need for them. This is going to sound goofy. The Italians will send horse cavalry to support Hitler in Russia. And in 1942, they make one of the final cavalry charges of the war. These kinds of things do happen. But the issue is, with the Pacific, the Japanese, don't have the stuff to back it up. They don't have good tanks. They don't have a lot of tanks. They don't have coordinated air-ground, coordination. They don't have good modern artillery with modern, shooting procedures. They simply don't have it. And so what that means is the Japanese are going to put up a heavy resistance. They're going to fight almost to the last man. But, we can see the pattern. The United States can I won't say easily, the United States can win the war. The question is simply how much of a price are we willing to pay? And on that note, I think we'll call it good. So as always, if you have any questions, let me know, and I will pick up with you guys in the next lecture. All right. Have a good one, guys.